The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. Today is July 16th. I believe that's correct. I believe that's correct too. 2024. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome as our guest a candidate for Mass State Senate. We know that our state senator, Walter Timilty, is leaving the post to become clerk of the Norfolk County of Court system. And so now there's an open seat, and we only have Democrats running for this seat. So listen up, everyone. On September 3rd, which is primary day, it's also going to be the final election day for the seat of state senator. So, because there are no Republicans running opposed. So today we welcome Erin Bradley from Milton, who has a very interesting and exciting background. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Priscilla. This is wonderful. It's great to be here in Easton.
You're welcome, yeah. And see that camera over there?
Yes.
That's what you look at. Don't look at me.
I will not look at you.
No.
It'll be hard though, but okay.
Oh, I know, but you know what? Our people want to see your face.
Gotcha.
And you're going to be talking to them. You're going to be pitching why you're the best candidate.
Perfect.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So I grew up in a small town very similar to Easton, out in western Massachusetts. It's called Agawam. And most of your residents will know it because it has a giant amusement park there, either Riverside, if you're my age, or Six Flags, if you're my children's age. And it's a great community, more rural than some of the other towns out that way. So we are a suburb of Springfield, and that's where I grew up and learned how to become a community activist.
And what were your earliest duties as a community activist?
Great question. So I recently found a photograph of myself holding signs for teachers. So there was a vote to have teachers' pay increase, and I was out there on the lines, voting lines, holding the signs, hoping that our teachers could get more money for the tough job they were doing as one of those young students.
How old were you?
Oh gosh, I was probably about 14, 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a start.
It was a start. It got you really enthused, interested, and passionate.
It did.
And so, but you ended up in Milton.
I did.
How did that happen?
Well, that's a crazy train ride, actually. I went to college down south. I went to a Southern Baptist university, very small university, and that's where I really honed my advocacy skills. I created the College Democrats there. And we actually had a protest back in the day. Jesse Helms was coming. You probably know Jesse Helms, a former senator of North Carolina who was very, very polarizing, to say the least. So we did a walkout on him when he stood up on stage. The College Democrats stood up, turned around and walked out. And so that was where I really found my love for advocacy and for speaking up for those that don't always have a voice. From there, I traveled across the country, literally by train, and got off in Chicago and went to work for the Chicago Sun-Times as a photo editor. And then came back home, came back to the Boston area, worked for the Boston Herald for a while, covered 9/11 in New York City. That's really where my life kind of took a pivot. I was at Ground Zero for 4 days, covering the tragedy and the horror that happened on that day. And I really wanted to do something that I could give back and get back to those roots. So I decided that I would do something a little bit easier and go into politics. And so so I went and actually became an intern at Senator Spilka's office, who is now the Senate President here in Massachusetts.
And say that name slowly.
Okay, sorry. Her name is Karen Spilka, Spilka. She is the Senate President, and I started with her as an intern, and I worked my way up to her policy analyst. I did that for many years. And then I was living in Quincy, actually, and my family decided that we wanted a more rural type of environment, which is how I grew up. So we chose Milton, which was the next closest suburb. So we ended up there, and I've loved it.
So you were in a more rural area, but also close to your job on Beacon Hill.
On Beacon Hill, yes. Even though some days it would take me an hour to get there, even though we're only 7 miles away. Yes, yeah, it was wonderful. I loved working on Beacon Hill. We did a lot of passionate things to really try and improve the system for children in DCF care. So I was very proud to say that I helped create the Office of the Child Advocate. We also did work to remove stigma. So we changed the Department of Mental Retardation to the Department of Developmental Disabilities, which was a big thing to really let our constituents know that we wanted to make a change for their lives to be better. I did that for quite some time past, have the pens to show the legislation I was able to get passed. And then I went to work right across the street. I worked for the Children's League of Massachusetts for almost a decade. It's a statewide advocacy organization advocating for children and families in DCF, DYS, and DMH care. So we really tried to make an impact on those families to make it easier for them.
So you have been a social advocate as well as a political advocate.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about all those years that you worked for Karen Spilka, because you were actually creating legislation for the issues that Ms. Spilka felt important. And that was about families, children and families, and the needs of those families.
Absolutely. So during that tenure, she really took an interest in an old law here in Massachusetts. It was passed back in the 70s, and it was called the Children in Need of Services. Its short acronym was CHINS. And it was a law that it was supposed to set up services for kids that were truant or kids that spoke back to their parents. I have 2 children. They speak back to me all the time sometimes. And so those types of kids, runaways. And what it was supposed to do was to help those families and those children. And what it ended up doing was creating an adversarial system. So parents would have to go to the court, DCF would be involved. Oftentimes DCF would take those children from their parent. And we really thought that that was not in the best interest of the children or the parents, being on one side of a courtroom and the kids on the other. So we set to work. We advocated for 7 years. It took us 7 years to pass the legislation. We started with a couple hundred groups from probation, the courts. We had HHS agencies. We had local police officers. We had everybody from the kids all the way up to the secretary of HHS, really working on trying to come up with a system that would be beneficial for the community. The thing that really hit me the hardest was when we had the ex-prisoners that came to help on the legislation. They were talking about how that was the entrance to the juvenile justice system for them, and how that really put them on a path that they didn't want to be on. So we worked really hard to stop that school to prison pipeline through the CHINS reform, and I'm happy to say that today it's been law for 12 years, and it seems to be doing well. There are community resource centers throughout the Commonwealth that are there to help children and their families that are going through some difficult times.
Okay, so you have had experience writing legislation and advocating for the legislation, bringing all the groups together, and that sounds to me like that's the job of a senator.
I think so too. One of the things I really love about being out here and campaigning right now is getting to hear everybody's issues, getting to know people in these communities. I was in Bridgewater the other day, and I said, I was talking to a younger gentleman, and I said, what concerns you? And he said, I really wish that there was a day for us to celebrate disabilities. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I happened to be mentioning it to somebody in Randolph, and the woman there said, well, we should make it the day that the ADA was signed. And I thought, this is how legislation should be made. It should be made from the ground up. It should be made by all of us coming together, bringing these ideas, and actually making it come to fruition. So for me, this is wonderful, being out here and learning about all the different towns. Easton is just, it's a delight here. I won't lie. I've been here a lot, door knocking and getting to know the residents and your elected officials, and I'm very smitten with Easton, I must say.
Well, so am I. I was born and raised here.
Oh,
I was away for many years and just returned 21 years ago. Fortunate enough to be in the home my parents built and I grew up in. And Easton is great. It's so different though. When I was growing up, there were 6,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
Now there are 26,000
Yes.
plus. And so but we still have 38% of the town in conservation.
Yes, which is wonderful. We
Yeah.
do too in Milton. We have a big conservation with the Blue Hills.
Right.
And it's something that's near and dear to my heart growing up in a rural community, making sure that we preserve that nature for our future generations.
Yes, okay. So tell me, what will be some of the legislation that you want to work on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's such an array. There's obviously some work that I would like to finish up to try and make protections for children in the Commonwealth. There are things that we need to worry about now from a national level that we've never had to worry about before, making sure that our rights for the LGBTQ community is preserved, making sure that a woman's right to choose is something that they can access here in the Commonwealth, making sure that those laws are stronger and for whatever may be coming down the road. Then there's things like, you know, making sure that our unions are protected. There's a bill out there right now for the nurses and any hospital worker who gets assaulted, and right now they have nothing that they can do. So this bill would actually make it so that they have some resources that they could use. There's a lot of things out there. One of my big things actually is around education. So as somebody who's been elected to the Milton Select Board, I've been dealing with our town budget now for 8 years, and I can tell you that it's getting harder and harder for us to close that gap every year. And one of the things that increases on a constant level is our education, whether that's special needs schooling, whether that's transportation, whatever it looks like. So one of the things I want to get in there and do is really get into that Chapter 70 funding, which is how we fund our local schools. If we had just tied that to inflation, we would have gotten $437 million more this year for our cities and towns in the Commonwealth.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's impressive.
It's something that we need to really take a look at as more and more mandates are coming down on our cities and towns. It's getting harder and harder for them to stretch their dollars since we only have the 2.5% that we can raise taxes. Now, I don't think that raising taxes is the ultimate way to do this, but I do think the state needs to start taking a look at ways that we can really come together and start making sure that our cities and towns are sustainable so that they are able to offer the quality schooling that we have all come to love here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
So you're already tried and true as a member of the Select Board in Milton.
Yes.
And you have been on the Finance Committee for 8 years?
And so yes, I did 5 years before I became a Select Board member. Yes.
I see, okay. So you know all about finances and having to juggle things to make things work.
Yes.
And I think that's the key word, isn't it? Work.
Yes.
You want to make things work for the people and that you represent. The other thing I find interesting is your willingness to go out and listen to people. Your desire that you want to hear from people, because nobody's an island. You know, if we've heard that expression, no one's an island. And yet some politicians think they are.
No.
And my dad was chairman of the Board of Selectmen back then when there were only 3 of them. And he would always say that his job was to listen and to encourage people to tell him what's important. So when there was an issue, he wouldn't just sit back and think, oh, well, I think this is what it should be. No, he would go out and he would ask people to tell him their feelings about it and so forth. And he would ask educators and other people and institutions as well as business people. And he would say, so when the table is laden with all this information and opinions, my job then is to evaluate it.
Right.
And come up with, and the one thing I always do when I'm making that final decision is to ask myself, what's in the best interests of the people in my community?
Absolutely.
What is in their best interests? And that's how he was to make the decision. So I remember when I was a candidate, I would, for public office in New York, I would always refer to my father, and he would say to me, "You are a public servant."
Yes.
And that means that you serve the public.
Yes.
You're a servant.
Yeah.
And how many of our politicians think that they are not the servant, but the master of all things?
Absolutely.
So it's so refreshing to hear you obviously are a public servant.
I am. And it's the people's house that I hope to represent this district. So I hope all the people come to the State House once I'm elected so that we can start building that, that pipeline from our district to the State House to make changes.
Thank you for the invitation. Now,
Yes.
Tell us, we have about 1 minute left.
Okay.
Tell us why the viewers should elect you as the next state senator representing Easton and Milton, and what are the other communities?
Oh, well, we've got Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Stoughton, Milton, Randolph, and Braintree.
Oh boy.
There's 7 of you.
Okay.
7.
And so Erin Bradley, tell the
Yes.
viewers why they should vote for you.
Thank you for this, and thank you again for having me today. The main reason why you should vote for me on September 3rd is because I have a proven track record. I'm the only candidate that has municipal experience. I understand what it's like to be on the ground level trying to make that budget work. I'm the only candidate that has that Senate experience, working in coalition, writing legislation, hearing from all sides before actually getting something passed and signed by the governor. I'm also the only candidate that has nonprofit experience that goes on for decades. I've been advocating for those that are, that need a little bit more oomph in their days. That's me. I'm out there, I'm advocating for you, and I want to hear from you. One of the biggest things is I want to bring our district together, bring us all together, because we all have the same problems. Whether it's Braintree, Easton, or Bridgewater, we're all dealing with the same things. And I want to bring us together and bring us to the State House and really make an impact for everybody that lives in this district. So that's why I think folks should vote for me.
Well, thank you, Erin Bradley.
Thank you. Thank you
and
so
best
much.
of luck on September 3rd.
September 3rd.
It's slated as a primary, but it's the final election day for the 3 Democrats who are running for that position because there is no Republican opposition.
Right.
So come and vote for your next state senator on September 3rd. Thank you, Erin Bradley, for being my guest today.
Thank you.
And thank you, viewers, for watching. Until next time, be well.